Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Derrick Brown and Pat Fitzmaurice. The fellas are here helping me fight through a cold, and we are here to talk about some fantasy football. Top 75 overall rankings. We're going to run through all of them. I think it goes 5 or 6 tiers in our expert consensus rankings. This is drawing off the half PPR rankings, so everybody knows they can go to fantasypros.com/rankings if you want to kind of follow along or just look at them yourself and see other names that we didn't highlight. But all of our early 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found there. Again, that's fantasypros.com/rankings. Fitz, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Worm. Is it more help to your cold for me to be here talking to you, or would you prefer that I fly out there and make you chicken soup from scratch?
I would not say no to some chicken soup from scratch. I'm a big tea drinker generally, so whenever I have like a sore throat or something, I am kind of already in the habit of making tea, but I don't do enough soup. So I should really work that into my meal prep when I'm not feeling so hot. So if that offer is a standing offer, I will take you up on that.
All right, I'll buy my plane tickets now and
perfect. I'm sure the company will reimburse it just to get me back on my feet. Devra, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Now I feel like I just need to impart, the best wisdom I can right now. A Benadryl and a shot of Grandma's cough syrup helps as far as decongestant, and the side effects can also help as well, buddy. So, if you got the sore throat, a little bit of bourbon's never a bad thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, is Grandma's cough syrup a euphemism for bourbon?
Yes,
I figured it had to be.
Okay. It better be, because
Grandma was a smart woman. Got to give it to her.
That's definitely what I'm planning on. I know we disagree, D-Bro. I'm more of a Scotch guy. You're more bourbon, but I do like both. Fair. Both plenty.
If it's brown, it goes down, bro. It's all good. Same thing.
We're just counting the days until we can get a sponsorship that's an actual real whiskey company, and they can send it to us. And we'll have to test it out so we can talk about it on the show. What a drag.
Please hit up Fantasy Pros. The guy's name is Jimmy. He loves all bourbon brands. Yes, yes, do that.
Yes, exactly. All right, that's enough preamble. Let's dive in. Like I said, we're talking our top 75 overall player rankings. The master list that I'll be working from is, like I said, that half PPR expert consensus rankings. Obviously, you guys are going to have some agreements and some disagreements with that main list, so that's what we're going to go through the show and sort of find out kind of round by round, about 12 players at a time. So let's start at the very top. 1 through 12, just to let everybody know what the rankings are. In order: Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Breece Hall, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Bijan Robinson, A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and Jonathan Taylor. I'm not going to read those a second time because that's a lot of names. So those are the 12 that we're working from here in round 1. As we stand here in mid-May, obviously this is subject to change. But Fitz, let's start with you. Which player kind of stands out to you as maybe being too high, too low, or you're not quite sure?
So it's Jonathan Taylor I want to talk about sneaking into the end of the first round. And I find it kind of interesting that he is ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs in the expert consensus rankings. It seems like in ADP, most of the time I see Gibbs ahead of Jonathan Taylor. And maybe this changes too in full point PPR rather than half point, where Gibbs might gain a little bit of value over Taylor. I'm personally good with it, though. I have Taylor ranked ahead of Gibbs in half-point PPR. After the top 5 running backs, McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Jahmyr Gibbs, I do think the position gets pretty dicey in a hurry, so I don't mind grabbing a running back if I'm sitting on the turn. Starting with a guy like Puka Nacua or Devontae Adams plus one of those 5 running backs. Not a bad way to start your draft. So injuries cost Taylor 7 games last year, 6 games in 2022, but they were relatively minor injuries, not like chronic soft tissue injuries, no torn knee ligaments, anything like that. And the last time we got a full season from JT, 2021, 1,800 rushing yards, 20 touchdowns, more than 2,100 yards from scrimmage. It was pretty glorious. Now Taylor is going to get paired with Anthony Richardson, a dangerous rushing threat in his own right. And I just keep thinking back to the rookie year we saw from Robert Griffin III in Washington in 2012, I believe it was, where he had 815 rushing yards and 7 touchdown runs in 15 games. And Washington's lead running back at the time was Alfred Morris, a 6th-round rookie with 4.67 speed. And in RG3's sensational rookie year, Alfred Morris ran for 1,600 yards and 13 touchdowns. And the threat that he posed, that RG3 posed on RPOs, run pass option plays, sent Alfred Morris's rushing efficiency through the roof. And I am now just getting like starry-eyed thinking of what it could be like with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. I mean, think about it. If you're a linebacker and you see Anthony Richardson sticking the ball into Taylor's breadbasket, but you don't know whether he's actually handing off or if he's going to pull the ball out and run, scoot around end himself. Like, that's definitely going to make those linebackers hesitate and give Jonathan Taylor a split second extra to get through a hole. So I can't wait to see what this is going to look like this year. And I think if we get a full season of good health for Jonathan Taylor, no one is going to regret taking him on the 1-2 turn.
You were right about that. The ADP, in the rankings, it's Taylor 12 and then Gibbs is 13. He leads off our next round. In ADP, it's switched. Gibbs is 12 overall and Taylor is 13. Yeah, that RG3 season is always the one that's like such a great comparison in terms of just seeing in action the extra efficiency you're going to get from the running backs. I was interning for a sports radio station in DC that season, and I mean, it was just like we talked about it every day. Essentially, we had a. It was an afternoon show, and it was RG 3 o'clock every afternoon. We would always talk about RG3.
It was such a fun offense to watch that year.
It really was.
Yeah, Washington was must-see TV.
It was a surprise, and it was exciting, and it was fun. It was unique. It was really a cool experience. Basically ever since then, every time we talk about a running back with a mobile quarterback, the question that I always feel like I'm asking, and I'll ask it again here because it's a new scenario, a different offense than some of the other ones we've asked about it before, is are you more excited about kind of the added efficiency you would expect from Taylor, or more pessimistic about the fact that Richardson will likely take a lot of those rushing touchdowns?
Yeah, some rushing touchdowns. Like, I don't think JT is duplicating the 20 touchdowns he had in 2021. But for the added rushing efficiency, I mean, Alfred Morris, 13 touchdowns in 2012. If we get 13 touchdowns from Jonathan Taylor, along with like 2,000 yards from scrimmage, I think everyone will be fine with whatever touchdowns Richardson poaches from JT.
Jonathan Taylor, D-Bro, what are you kind of evaluating him this season? I mean, this is somebody who just like 2 years ago was going in the first round of Superflex startup dynasty drafts. I mean, he was like the one running back that everybody was trying to get a part of. I mean, has it just been injuries the last couple of years? Is there any reason to think that he's 25 now? Like, are you shying away at all? Are you pretty happy to invest in Taylor as well?
I'm hand holding with Pat here. So I'm with on JT. Like, I've got JT as my 12th overall player. I have him above Zamir Gibbs. He is my RB5 in ranks. It's only him and Saquon Barkley alone by themselves in tier 2. And so I'm not worried about Anthony Richardson poaching touchdowns. I'm not worried about, Anthony Richardson taking off, and there's not going to be a lot of pass game volume. If JT runs like we think he's already done previously in his career, and he does that again this year, the touchdowns and the rushing volume alone will be enough to carry him to a high-end RB1 season alone. And we haven't even talked about the context of the offense. Like, this is not going to be a top 10 passing rate offense. And we can also marry that what we saw down the back half of the season. They are going to run at a fast pace. So if we're talking about there's going to be a lot of play volume, it's not all getting funneled to the passing game, then it's going to have to go to the run game. So JT is going to eat. I'm not backing off of that because, come on, guys, like we've seen year after year after year, injuries are fluky. Injuries can happen, or maybe they don't happen. So I'm not willing to label anybody as being, they're injury prone, because that's the most divisive thing. And where there's uncertainty, I'm just going to dive in, because if JT stays healthy, yeah, he's locked in. He's a high-end RB1.
I'm glad he mentioned the faster pace too. I didn't even mention that, the Shane Steichen dividend.
Mm-hmm. I think ranking him around 12th or so is fair in terms of how you line it up. I think I'll be considering drafting him as high as 9. To me personally, there's kind of a really clear top 8, which lines up, maybe in a different order, but it lines up with the top 8 in consensus. Once you get to 9, like I feel like you could pretty easily justify, depending on how you want to build your team and who you expect to get in the second round, you could justify Taylor ahead of Puka, ahead of Garrett Wilson, ahead of AJ Brown even. Like I think you could really make a case for him as high as 9. Because again, if he's healthy, like he's going to.
I don't disagree.
There's
I don't disagree at all.
You're saying, just to be clear, behind CMC, Bijan, Breece Hall, and then the top 4 receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase.
And then Amon-Ra is kind of the one.
Amon-Ra, okay.
The 8th guy in that group. And I actually, I would hear the argument for Taylor above Amon-Ra. I would prefer the Sun God. But yeah, that would be the 8. Is those 3 running backs, I'm not putting anybody ahead of them at the position. And then obviously the elite receivers. But after that, I'm really happy if I'm in the back half of the first round picking 9 or 10. I think I'm going to take a lot of Jonathan Taylor.
I think one guy we're not going to talk too much about in this spot, I think Saquon Barkley is also in that same conversation. I think that with him and JT, depending on what you think of that offense, he's in that same type of conversation where he should get all the freaking work. Yes, there's worries about the rushing quarterback, but again, drawing the parallels, they're going to run at a high pace and stuff. We're going to see a good offense with Kellen Moore at the controls. I think Barkley and JT, for me, are hand-holding, and both of them, the conversation starts for them in 9th overall.
Fitz mentioned kind of like when you're actually picking in the back of the first round. I think if I'm picking 12th in leagues, I will be doing a lot of double dipping at running back, some combination of Taylor, Gibbs, and Barkley. I think I'll be doing a lot of. Again, it's early. That philosophy could change. D-Bro, which player did you want to talk about here in this top 12?
It's got to be Puka Nacua, man. I mean, we're talking about a guy that came out of nowhere. Well, I mean, for me, this comes down to people are going to talk about, because it's going to get talked about with Cooper Kupp and how many players can Matthew Stafford support, because this is what we do every single year. People did it all last season, so they're going to do it again this year. And they're going to talk about, well, Kupp is fully healthy. What does it look like for Puka? And I don't have a problem with it at all, man. Like, I'm willing to draft Puka. Right now, I have him at 9th overall right now. And I'm willing to take him there every single time in drafts. And I just talked about the conversation starting for JT. There's also a really good conversation for Puka deserves to be inside of the top 10 as a first-round lock with upside. Because in the 12 games we saw him and Kupp on the field together last year, he outproduced Kupp in every single metric. Target share, air yard share, yards per route run, end zone targets, fantasy points per game. In those 12 games, Puka Nacua was the wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game as a freaking rookie, man. So now we're talking about he's being drafted inside the first round. Where people have him in their wide receiver ranks is totally up for debate. Right now, he is my wide receiver 6. I think he has top 3 upside this year. He was the wide receiver 12 when both these guys were on the field last year. And if we see a better offense for the Rams throughout the totality of this season, the offensive line is good. Stafford stays healthy the entire year. And I know that's a big if, but also marrying this, it's also another year of age for Cooper Kupp. So if he comes back, and the divide last year, he was the wide receiver 12 and Kupp was the wide receiver 23 in that stretch. If that divide gets a little bit wider, guys, if it does, Puka goes from being a low-end wide receiver 1 to a high-end wide receiver 1, and we've seen Stafford can support all of those guys. Like, this offense is going to be good. So I'm willing to sit here and make the bet on Puka yet again this year, that he can not only pay off on his ADP, but there is ceiling to be had here too.
If you're willing to say that he has wide receiver 3 upside, couldn't you just say he's wide receiver 1 upside? Because those elite guys are all so good that if you're in that top 3, there's no reason you can't be 1, right?
No,
or do you think there's
I agree. Then it comes down to, okay, if I think that he can get the volume and be productive enough to be top 3, then some of that just comes down to touchdown volatility.
Yeah.
Can he get the touchdown bump to get him past other guys in that? That's really all what it comes down to. It's like, if you have the volume ceiling to get to, in your range, to get to the top 5, getting over that hump from wide receiver 5 to wide receiver 1 overall just comes down to maybe you need a little bit more of the volume to go your way, not much, and you really just need the touchdowns to massively swing your way, which can happen.
Yeah, definitely. Fitz, you've got Puka 4 spots lower, which, than D-Bro does. That wouldn't be a lot if we were talking about a round 5 pick, but in the first round, that's not nothing, even if it's not like a crazy difference. Are you waiting till the early second round to draft Puka, or would you be considering him in the back half of the first?
I mean, I'd at least consider him in the back half of the first. Just the scarcity of dependable running backs would probably push me in that direction first, where I'd be taking JT over Puka. But I have no issues with Puka. If anyone wants to take him like right around that 110, 111 spots. Because Puka just passed every eye test. Debro talked about how Puka outdid Cooper Kupp in every metric pretty much when they were playing together. And like Cooper Kupp, I mean, the injuries really are mounting for this guy. And it's become kind of a chronic thing, including some soft tissue injuries, which we know tend not to go away over time. So, I mean, if you're pegging the over-under on number of games played for Cooper Kupp at like 14.5, I'm probably betting under on that. That's maybe where part of the ceiling comes in for Puka, but he did pass every eye test with flying colors as a rookie. Like, he was really good at getting open. He was really good at making yardage after the catch. Like, we saw this guy just kick butt in his rookie year, and like that genie is not getting stuffed back into the bottle. Like, this is who Puka Nacua is, and the only thing that's really going to slow him down, I think, would be injury.
Puka drank the juice, and then he Gronk spiked the bottle on the floor. He said, I'm not going back in. No, baby.
The NFL draft is over and the teams are set. It's time to start looking ahead to the NFL season with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Get a jump start on the season with futures bets on division winners, win totals, stat leaders, and so much more. Explore the latest odds on which rookies will have the most passing or receiving yards, or check out futures for your favorite teams and players on the DraftKings Sportsbook app. One bet that I am looking at right now is the stacked Offensive Rookie of the Year race. Caleb Williams, obviously the heavy favorite at plus 175. I know Debro is all in on Jaden Daniels in fantasy at least. He's plus 650, same as Marvin Harrison Jr. J.J. McCarthy's at plus 800, and Malik Neighbors at plus 1,400. They round out the top five. I think you could make a reasonable case for any of those guys as bets at least worth considering. However you plan to bet your NFL futures, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. New customers bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. That's code FantasyPros, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's move to round two here, 13 to 24. And in order, those guys are Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Brandon Ayuk, Marvin Harrison Jr., Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams, Chris Olave, Josh Allen, Travis Etienne, Drake London, Mike Evans, and Derrick Henry. Debro, we'll start with you this time. Who are you highlighting here?
I'm not freaking disrespecting Derrick Henry this year. I'm not doing it. Just not going to happen, man. He's 24th overall right now. In my rankings, I have him as the RB, the RB7, and I've got him as my 15th overall player, and I'm willing to draft him there every single time. And some dudes are just built different. Derrick Henry he's shown us this year after year after year after year after year. And I'm not betting against that, especially now in Baltimore. Last year, Derrick Henry, no fall off. Among 68 qualifying running backs, 11th in yards after contact per attempt, 16th in missed tackles forced per attempt. And now he goes to the Baltimore Ravens that were 5th in red zone rushing plays per game last year. You have Derrick Henry. You're not going to be slamming Lamar into the offensive line inside the 5. That's going to be Derrick Henry time every single freaking time. He can have 15-plus rushing touchdowns this year. I talked about this on previous shows. I already bet the over at plus money when it was like, I think, 10.5. Derrick Henry is spiking double-digit touchdowns this year. I would say the median line for him probably needs to be set over under 12. And he's going to just crush. So this ranking of Derrick Henry, like barely scraping into the top 24, I'm drafting him above that every single time in drafts.
I genuinely don't see a path, if he stays healthy, to having under a dozen touchdowns. Like, I just don't see how it happens if he's healthy. And quite frankly, I think that number is low. Like I'm right there with you. I would expect even closer to 15, which sounds crazy, but again, I feel like I've talked about this on a lot of shows. Also, I guess with you, Debro, just that like they don't want to run Lamar in close. They would prefer to run with a running back. We just saw it with Gus Edwards last year, and now you're upgrading on that spot. Like you said, a lot of the metrics show that, maybe he's not like truly prime Derrick Henry, but he wasn't far off last year.
He's still an elite tackle breaker. Like we could quibble about it. Maybe he's not top 3, top 5 in some of these metrics. He's still top 16 in almost everything you look at. So,
and I know that there's question marks about the Baltimore offensive line, but they are really good historically at kind of finding those surprise guys that you wouldn't have expected to, like, they draft guys a couple years in advance to develop, and then all of a sudden they're good starters. Maybe that will happen, maybe it won't. But he also has proven he can run well behind a poor offensive line in Tennessee. So I'm really not worried about what the Baltimore O-line looks like. I'm really excited about Henry. I'm right there with you. Interestingly, and Fitz, I do want to get your opinion on this, because our staff rankings are of you two plus Erickson and Joe. Debro and Joe have him 15th and 16th overall. Fitz and Erickson have him 47th and 48th overall. So there is a wide middle ground here between where kind of each duo has him ranked. Fitz, what?
Tell me it ain't so, man. Fitzy!
What do Debro and I need to do to convince you, Fitz?
Fitzy! Come on, Fitzy.
I don't think you're ever going to convince me to draft a 30-year-old running back in the top 2 rounds, ever. I don't care if it's like, Jim Brown coming back to play, and, like... It's just, first of all, by the way, if you guys are setting the over-under on touchdowns that Lamar Jackson scores rushing from inside the 5 at 0.5, I'll happily bet the over on that. And I think it's going to be more than just one also. Like, Henry is not getting all of those touchdowns. The thing about Henry, yes, the age, he's 30, and he has led the NFL in rushing attempts in either, I think it's 3 of the last 4 years or maybe 4 of the last 5, like high mileage, older back. And I've made this case against Derrick Henry sort of before, and I've just routinely been burned on it. I guess I don't want to reverse my position now that he's crossed that age 30 threshold. The other thing, like, he's not going to be a prolific pass catcher in this offense. We know that. Derrick Henry never has been in his career, and Lamar is not a prolific check down guy. So that kind of shuts off one possible path to fantasy value. He's got to do it all on the ground. And I think to justify top 2 round draft capital, he's going to have to get you like 1,500 rushing yards and double-digit rushing touchdowns. He could do it. I mean, he's a great running back, no question, if he's totally healthy. But, do we start to see him creep towards that age cliff? Does this offense work quite as effectively as you guys are envisioning, which, as you mentioned, Worm, maybe a few more questions about this offensive line than there used to be. So I can't get on board with taking Henry in the first 2 rounds.
Well, Fitz, one thing I would ask is, not the only, but one of the reasons you like Jonathan Taylor is, that he's paired with a mobile quarterback. You don't think that will help open up? The Ravens have never had a bad rushing attack in the Lamar Jackson era, even when their offensive line has been less than elite. It's hard for me to imagine that the threat of Lamar... And Lamar's dropped a lot of weight, and theoretically is going to be even faster this year than he has been the last couple of years. He's the thinnest he's been since that 2019 season. It's really hard for me to imagine a scenario where this isn't a quality rushing attack, and they don't really have a great depth chart behind Henry.
I'm grinning ear to ear. I'm grinning ear to ear here, and I don't mean to cut you off, Fitzy, because Worm is attempting to use your JT love against you right now. You realize that, right? I mean, you realize what's going on here, right?
This is taekwondo, using my own offensive moves against me.
The 4D chess, the 4D chess, man.
No, it's a good point. I mean, I think this could spike the efficiency of Derrick Henry for sure. So, and we don't know what the volume is going to look like, but presumably, if he does stay healthy for all 17 games, he's going to be, once again, if not the leader in rushing attempts in the NFL, top 3, top 5. So, there's that case for sure. It's the age thing, man. I just can't put that sort of investment into a 30-year-old running back.
I get it. I just think that he just has been an outlier for a lot of his career. Sure. And I'm willing to continue. Philosophically, I agree with you, but outliers, I tend to give a little more benefit of the doubt. At the end of the day, I actually I wouldn't take him as high as 15 where Debro has him, but I certainly would take him well before the late 40s. I think I would have him somewhere in the middle, definitely closer to Debro. He would be in the 20s, somebody I'd be really interested in the back half of the second round, depending, if I got a wide receiver in the first round. There's no way I'm letting him get to the end of round 4. That just, would not happen for me.
Well, to Fitzy's point, right now in current best balls on Underdog, Derrick Henry is at 31.7. So the market's kind of shading in the middle of kind of where we're both at.
I think that, like, I'll try and play into that, and like I won't take him maybe in the back of the second round because I'll be pretty confident I can get him in the third round instead, and kind of try and game that. But I like I said, I'm very excited about him. Fitz, the player that you highlighted in this round, I was expecting this would be another opportunity for you to gush about Marvin Harrison Jr. and why, as a rookie, we should still be so excited about him. Instead, you went in a different direction.
Yeah, it's Josh Allen I want to talk about, because I'm actually more aggrieved by the premise of Josh Allen being a second-round pick than I am of Derrick Henry being a second-round pick. Like, I'd rather have Derrick Henry in the second than Josh Allen. And I'll start this conversation about Josh Allen with a point about Patrick Mahomes. All right, so this is how many fantasy points per games Patrick Mahomes averaged yearly over his first 5 years as a starter. 26.1, 20.9, 25.4, 22.0, 25.2. Then last year, Mahomes averaged 18.4 fantasy points per game. He ranked 12th in that category. Why the dip? Because the Chiefs had one of the worst wide receiver situations in the league. I mean, yes, Rashee Rice had a good season, but it was all like manufactured catch and run stuff. Rashee Rice had under 500 air yards last year. Like, Patrick Mahomes had no one from among his wide receivers who could make plays downfield for him consistently. So shouldn't we be at least slightly concerned that a lack of firepower at wide receiver could cut into Josh Allen's passing productivity this year? Like, he just lost Stephon Diggs, who averaged 111 catches, 1,343 receiving yards, and 9.3 touchdowns in his 4 years in Buffalo. And he also lost Gabe Davis, who, granted, not a star, but like a dangerous vertical threat for Josh Allen, made a lot of big plays over the last few years. The thing is, I like some of the Bills' pass catchers. You guys know I'm a Keon Coleman fan, but I think he's going to be good. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I don't know that we can count on a 1,000-yard season from a rookie who didn't even have an 800-yard receiving season in his 3 years in college. I like Khalil Shakir, really like his game, but is he ready to be an impact guy, like a high-volume guy? I don't know. Like, Curtis Samuel, useful. He's only top 700 receiving yards once in his career. And like, I like Dalton Kincaid, definite draft target for me this year because of all the uncertainty at wide receiver. But like, Dalton Kincaid's not going to have 100 catches. So the cupboards aren't completely bare here, but we should probably acknowledge the distinct possibility that this turns out to be a bottom 10 group of pass catchers. And I don't want this to seem like I'm dumping on Josh Allen, because I think he is awesome. And, you know, I don't want the Bills Mafia power bombing me through a table. Allen has been the QB1 in 3 of the last 4 years. And the 1 year he didn't finish QB1, he finished QB2. I just think, like, even though his rushing ability, and he's certainly a more prolific runner than Patrick Mahomes, gives him an elevated floor, I don't know if he's got the ceiling with these questions about his pass catchers. And if you're going to be drafting a quarterback in round 2, you need a lot more than a safe floor. You need 25 points a game from him. And I'm not sure we're getting 25 points a game from Josh Allen this year. And frankly, I don't know if even 25 points a game justifies drafting a quarterback in round 2.
So you kind of alluded to it there right at the end. Are you saying that Josh Allen would not be your QB1, or you're saying regardless of who your QB1 is, you're not taking them in the middle of the second round?
In fact, he is not my QB1 this year, Worm. It's Patrick Mahomes, who now has pass catchers galore. So we're going to see Patrick Mahomes once again put up 25 points a game, I think, this year.
And for Patrick Mahomes, would you take him? You wouldn't take him in the second round?
No, not in round 2, no.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Debra, how are you kind of approaching the top quarterbacks this year?
I'm not taking any freaking quarterback in the second round. I'm not doing it. So, and honestly, the market is agreeing with us versus our ECR. So the market right now, like if you're looking at underdog, I mean, Josh Allen's going off as the QB1. The market is also saying we're not touching quarterbacks until round 3. He's going off the earliest off the board at 33 overall. And that's about where I have my QB1, which I have Jalen Hurts as my QB1, but I have Hurts is at 31st overall. And it's hard. It's a hard conversation for me to rank Josh Allen as QB1, much less for me to even convince myself, even if I had him as my QB1, to draft him in round 2, because Josh Allen's profile from last year is kind of littered with questions and worries. Like, if you look at the volume stats, yeah, they stayed pretty similar. His passing touchdown rate dropped from 6.2 to 5.0%. That was over the last 4 years of his career. That is the lowest passing touchdown rate. And people could say the sunny side for that is you could say, oh, well, he'll bounce back. Sure, you could say that, but then you look at his wide receiver weapons that Fitz all laid out, and you're like, well, I don't know if that happens. And it's like, well, then how did Josh Allen, because Josh Allen consistently over the last 3 years was a 35-plus passing touchdown guy yearly, 35, 36, 37. Last year, only 29, and the only way that he compensated with that, as well as his rushing volume dropped, guys. He was consistently like 660 or 760 as far as rushing yards. That dropped off a table to 524, and it's like, well, then how in the heck did he make up all this fantasy production and still end with because his freaking rushing touchdowns went from 7 to 15. So if that doesn't happen this year and the passing touchdowns stay about where they are, the rushing touchdowns stay about where they are, and some of the touchdowns go to the running backs, which it could happen. I mean, Josh Allen in the previous 3 seasons, 7, 6, 8 rushing touchdowns. If he doesn't spike it, if those passing numbers lean over even to this year and he reproduces what he did last year and the rushing touchdowns don't go along and he doesn't spike it in the end zone 10 to 12 to maybe 15 freaking times, Josh Allen's not scoring like he did last year. I'm sorry, Bills Mafia, but it's true.
The Fantasy Pros Championship is back for 2024 and is already live for the upcoming season. We're partnering with the FFPC again to bring you the world's largest season-long fantasy football tournament with over $6 million in total prizes and $1 million to first place. Head over to fantasypros.com/FFPC for all the contest information and to sign up today. Make sure you use promo code FantasyPros on sign up for $25 off your first entry. That's fantasypros.com/FFPC. Promo code FantasyPros for $25 off. Let's go to round 3 here from 25 to 36 in order. Deebo Samuel, Sam Laporta, Jalen Hurts, Travis Kelce, Michael Pittman Jr., DJ Moore, Josh Jacobs, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Nico Collins, Isaiah Pacheco, and Rashad White. Fitz, who are you looking at here?
I just think the ADPs for all the Texans wide receivers are too high. We've got Nico Collins with a 3rd-round ADP, Stephon Diggs with a 4th-round ADP, Tank Dell with a 5th-round ADP. I feel like for all of these guys to provide satisfying returns on investment at those ADPs, C.J. Stroud would have to throw for like 7,000 yards and 68 touchdowns. All right, maybe exaggeration, but like even with a good season from C.J. Stroud, I think that we are going to find that at least one of these guys, if not all 3, are overpriced, and I don't know who's going to be the number 1 receiver in Houston. Like, Nico is priced that way right now, but I mean, Stephon Diggs did average 111 receptions over the last 4 years, and I know he kind of collapsed down the stretch last year, just 1 touchdown over his last 10 games, 42.2 receiving yards per game over that stretch, but I just can't even consider taking Nico Collins in round 3 when the Texans just traded for a guy who has been like the walking definition of a number 1 go-to alpha receiver for the last 4 years.
Yeah, I would rather have Diggs in the 4th than Nico in the 3rd. And I think there's a case to be made that Diggs should be ranked ahead of Nico. There was an offensive coordinator change in Buffalo. Like that, I don't think is nothing in terms of seeing Diggs kind of fall off there. And I don't think Houston makes this trade and, you know, is willing to get rid of all the years in the contract just kind of going in for this season and is not going to use Diggs a ton. And Diggs is still really talented. So, like, I probably, like, if you ask me today, I think I'm probably would prefer Collins over Diggs. I just like Diggs better at the value. But I think there's a real chance that 3 months from now, as I marinate on it more, that I'm sitting there saying we're overreacting to a bad second half of the season last year, and Diggs is looking pretty underrated. I know he's a Terp, so maybe I'm a little biased. But could you see yourself ranking him ahead of Collins at some point, Fitz?
Diggs, yeah. I mean, like I've got them adjacent to each other, I believe. And I love Nico. I mean, I love his game. I love how he just plays bully ball with guys, both at the catch point and after the catch. Like he is a load for defensive backs to deal with. But man, it's just the target competition. And let's not forget about Debro's guy, Tank. Like Tank is a playmaker. So man, it's just a lot of targets to be spread around to three talented wide receivers. I just can't take Nico as a top 20 wide receiver right now.
Yeah, Debro, not too long on this, but just how do you kind of see this receiving core shaking out between those three guys?
The same conversation we're having about Nico Collins and Houston is going to we're going to cut and paste this to the guy that I'm about to bring up here in a second, but I'm with you on that. Like Nico Collins should not be drafted. I've got him at 41st overall, so he's kind of slowly he's leading the way on these guys, but there is not a big divide between him, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. And you're telling me at cost, who do I want out of this room? It's not Nico Collins. It's really Tank Dell. And people, if you want to go check my timeline, go look at it on Twitter. I put this out weeks ago and it's funny because I put this out right before Stephon Diggs got traded. I think it was the day before he got traded to Houston, was that when Nico and Tank were on the field together playing full-time roles, Tank Dell was actually Houston's wide receiver 1. He bested Nico in multiple spots, target share included. And so it's like Nico was really great, but the entire wide receiver core falling apart around him towards the end of the season, where he was just the unquestioned alpha, is also helping how people are viewing him walking into this season. And that's just going to piggyback right onto, I can't draft DJ Moore where he's going. Like the fact that he is going right now as 30th overall player in my ranks, I've got DJ Moore in the 40s. It's the same exact conversation for Houston and Chicago. It's like one of these guys is going to be a really stinking good value on both of these teams. And it comes back to how much can either one of these quarterbacks support? Can CJ Stroud really pull a Peyton Manning and all three of these guys get 1,000 receiving yards? Are we going to ask that out of a freaking rookie and Caleb Williams? So it's like, how do we firmly believe that DJ Moore is going to pay off at that price tag, which right now, where he's at in ECR, he volumed his way to what he did last year. It was all volume. He was 12th in target share. He was freaking 5th in air yard share amongst all wide receivers. And you could say, well, maybe Chicago throws the ball more this year. That's fine, but Keenan Allen is not a guy that's ready to be put out to freaking pasture. He was 2nd in first read share last year, 11th in first downs per route run. He is not dust. He's not old. He's not terrible, and he can command targets. So it's like, how are we so sure that DJ Moore doesn't take a more significant hit in his value, not only from just Keenan Allen, but freaking Rome Odunze, who is a studly in his own right?
I've talked a lot this offseason about how historically it is difficult for receivers to have really good fantasy seasons with rookie quarterbacks. Again, and I've said this before, it's not impossible, but it is, not easy. So I think it's a reasonable concern. I do feel like, considering that Rome is a rookie I like very much, but is a rookie, and Keenan Allen isn't always healthy and is another year older, and it's first year in Chicago, like Moore is still the guy I want most by a decent amount in that Chicago receiving core. If you want to say that 30th is still too high, I think that's reasonable, but he's still, to me, the clear wide receiver to target in that offense. What do you think, Fitz?
Same here. I mean, I would bet on DJ Moore leading the Bears in receptions, receiving yards, touchdown catches, but Debro makes a great point. And the funny thing is, like early in DJ Moore's career in Carolina, he had some major quarterback issues playing with guys like Sam Darnold, Kyle Allen, still produced. big numbers, like putting up 1,100 yard seasons with those guys. And now this might be the best quarterback he's ever played with in Caleb Williams. And like this is kind of the most concerned I've ever been about DJ Moore, just because the target competition is going to be so severe. It is hard to imagine. Like, I don't think we're expecting a 5,000 yard passing season from Caleb as a rookie. So, man, like with these targets and receiving yards chopped up this many ways, like it's hard to see DJ Moore getting much over 1,100 yards if he even gets to that. So as much as I like him and as awesome as I think he is, like I think concerns about his volume are very valid.
By the way, my big takeaway from the Texans part of this conversation is I'm going to be drafting a lot of Stroud. Like I'd rather not try and parse between which receiver it's going to be.
I've already bet it. I bet as soon as they made that trade, Worm, I went out and I went to DraftKings and I bet his MVP futures immediately, because I'm like, if he does what he should do and Houston wins the South and they're like an 11 and 12 win team, then CJ Stroud's going to be in the MVP conversation.
I love the news comes out, go bet somebody for MVP before the odds can adjust. I did it with Lamar last year. I was just stupid enough to tie it to the Ravens also winning the Super Bowl, so it didn't pay off. But I did.
So
I did try.
close,
yeah.
so close.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next round here. At 37, Jaylen Waddle. Then Devon Achane, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Smith, Joe Mixon, Cooper Kupp, James Cook, CJ Stroud, Amari Cooper, Kenneth Walker, and Malik Neighbors. Fitz, who are you highlighting here?
Kenneth Walker, and I really like this price on Kenneth Walker III, and I think I'm going to wind up having him in a lot of leagues this year. It seems like people are worried about Zach Charbonnet being this existential threat to Kenneth Walker's workload. But Walker averaged 16.5 touches a game last year, which was basically twice as many as Charbonnet, and I don't see why that would change this year. Meanwhile, there are other running backs going ahead of Walker who might be sharing touches. Devon Achane, who almost certainly will be. Kyron Williams, who now has Blake Corum around and might have to cede some of his workload. Zamir Gibbs, who of course is going to give up early down stuff to David Montgomery. When Walker came into the league 2 years ago, there were some people who liked him as much as Breece Hall. I mean, he was fast. He was athletic. Yeah, Debro, exactly. Put up huge numbers at Michigan State in his final college season. And I don't think Walker has really done anything to disappoint us yet. Now, he has missed a couple of games in each of his first two NFL seasons, which has sort of held down his overall numbers, and maybe that's sort of like a little bit of a mirage that's throwing off drafters. But like this guy's averaged a smidge under 80 scrimmage yards a game over his first two seasons, and has scored 9 touchdowns in each of his first two seasons. And oh, by the way, the sexy selling point for Kenneth Walker is that no running back in the NFL has forced more missed tackles over the last 2 years than Kenneth Walker. So like, I think this is a guy who's got big time upside, and who it would not shock me if we were talking about as a consensus first rounder a year from now.
Debro, what do you think of Walker, and specifically how he might fit into the offense, run by Brian Grubb, who is, obviously coming from Washington?
I think this offense is one of many that I feel like could be one of the skeleton keys to this fantasy season. In what they look like, there's a lot of parallels in looking at all the Washington stuff of, does Seattle, because how are we going to parse this out? You have a defensive-minded head coach. Are they going to be run-heavy? You have an OC that comes from, heck, Washington was like, we're going to rip it, and chuck it down the freaking field. So it's like, are they going to be run-heavy? Are they going to be pass-heavy? Are they going to be a mix of the two? What does that look like? It's just one of those teams where I feel like we're going to mine value out of this because nobody's talking about Seattle. I love Fitz's points because Kenneth Walker's done nothing outside of like get dinged up and be injured that's depressed his value in some of his stats. If he would have stayed healthy over the last 2 years, people be talking about Kenneth Walker in a totally different light. And This is no shade to Zach Charbonnet, but looking at this offense, I definitively think this offense is going to go out and be a lot better than it was last year, because people are not also baking in that Seattle had a bottom 5 freaking offensive line last year. Everything that could have gone wrong for their offensive line went wrong. Geno did not play bad last year, and I'm going to repeat that. Geno Smith did not play bad last year when they were actually able to keep him clean in the pocket. Every one of his numbers was still top 12, regardless of however you splice quarterback play, when he was in a clean pocket. Now, the problem is he faced the 5th highest pressure rate in the freaking NFL last year. This offensive line, if it's better this year, it's going to affect the entire offense, the passing offense, and it's going to trickle down to Kenneth Walker. So I'm willing to buy in, and I'm with Fitzy. I think they're ceiling here.
Debro, let's stick with you for the player you want to highlight in this group.
Dude, I get I feel like the full season numbers for Jaylen Waddle are lying to us, in the sense that what we saw, if you look at just his ending season stat line, people are like, oh yeah, let's go. Low end wide receiver 2. Ha! Like, he's the wide receiver 19 in ECR. He was wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. Yes! These are good things, right? And I'm like, if you really rostered Jaylen Waddle last year, you know that it was not that pretty on a week-to-week basis, and he really doesn't deserve that ranking, because he was the wide receiver 27 in expected fantasy points per game. 57% of his games last year, he did not finish on a weekly basis as a top 24 wide receiver. And he got no red zone usage or end zone usage. He was 42nd in end zone targets. He only got 6 end zone targets the entirety of last year. And now they add competent pass catchers around him and Tyreek Hill and Odell Beckham Jr. and Jonnu Smith. And I'm not telling you that Odell is going to like siphon off all of his volume, or Jonnu is. But you're telling me a guy that also last year, if you look at the per week numbers, they are much worse, as well as he wasn't getting end zone usage last year. It's hard to really say he's going to definitively get it this year. So why are we so just enamored and ready to dive back into the low-end wide receiver 2 pool with Jaylen Waddle, when I think, like right now in my rankings, I've got him significantly downgraded. Like, he's 53rd overall on my board. And now, as far as wide receivers go, he's not that dramatically lower. There's just a lot of running backs and other players. Like, he's wide receiver 24, but I am going to be below consensus in some way, shape, or form on Jaylen Waddle versus everybody else, because I just feel like these full season numbers are lying to us.
Well, and Fitz, if Debro is the low man on Waddle, you're the high man on the Fantasy Pro staff. At least from what I see here, you've got him in the high 20s.
Yeah, so I guess my issue here, and Debro is right about the consistency. Last year, we didn't get it week to week from Jaylen Waddle. He was kind of erratic. It was some big boom weeks and some bust weeks. But I feel like Waddle is sort of in the Brandon Cooks class as far, and maybe that's not the best example since Brandon Cooks did not have a good year last year, but a guy who, for most of his career, has just been so adaptable to whatever situation you threw him into. I mean, Brandon Cooks kept getting sort of passed around the league, and wherever he went, he would fit into that new situation and put up a 1,000-yard season. And we've seen Waddle produce 1,000-yard seasons without fail since coming into the NFL. And he's done it without Tyreek Hill, and he's done it with Tyreek Hill, and he's done it as a short area receiver used close to the line of scrimmage, and he's done it as a vertical threat and sort of a designated like shot play guy. So I kind of feel like he's just going to succeed no matter what. And I'm not really worried about, Odell Beckham Jr. or Malik Washington or Jonnu Smith stealing targets from him, because I feel like he is a guy who doesn't need to have many more than 100 targets to give you wide receiver 2 value. And granted, I do hope he's a little more consistent than last year. I don't know if we can expect consistency when you have to share a field with Tyreek Hill, but I do feel like Jaylen Waddle is just this guy who's really good and is going to get his.
Let's go to the next grouping here. At 49, T. Higgins. Then Anthony Richardson, Alvin Kamara, Trey McBride, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Keenan Allen, Christian Kirk, Aaron Jones, George Pickens, Tank Dell, and David Montgomery. And Fitz, I want to start with you here because you told us before the show that you're not entirely sure this player you want to highlight if you want to move him up or down.
Yeah, George Pickens. I have no idea whether I should be in or out on George Pickens at his price this year. Like with Deontay Johnson getting traded to the Carolina Panthers, Pickens is the clear number one, I think, in Pittsburgh. And the Steelers have upgraded the QB position by adding Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, so they're even protected against an injury at quarterback. And it is worth remembering that after Deontay Johnson hurt his hamstring in week 1 last year, Pickens had 17 catches, 357 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the 4 games where Johnson was on injured reserve. But, well, Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is now the Pittsburgh play caller. Last year in Atlanta, Drake London was the only good wide receiver on the Falcons roster, and yet he ranked 24th in targets among wide receivers and was 37th in PPR scoring among wide receivers. And, even before Arthur Smith arrived in Pittsburgh, Pickens was not exactly a prolific target earner. So I'm really conflicted here. Oh, and by the way, I don't like paying too much attention to schedule, but Pittsburgh does have a murderous schedule down the stretch, and that includes 4 games late in the season against the Browns and Ravens, whose pass defenses ranked 1st and 2nd in DVOA last year. So there's just a lot I'm conflicted about here. I could see like a smash breakout season for Pickens. I could see a really disappointing season for Pickens. I'm just not sure what to do with this guy.
What are you doing with him, Debro? Because I kind of agree with Fitz that he's not somebody that's easy to really come down on either way.
Right now, as Fitz was talking, I'm currently dropping him in my ranks a little bit, so that's what I'm doing with him. I think that there are 2 sides to this. Can you make the volume conversation for Pickens, in which I did earlier in the offseason as soon as, Deontay Johnson was traded? And the more that I've had time to kind of simmer about this, the more that I have gotten worried about it, because it's not just the passing volume, and now we add the schedule on top of that. Whether you want to talk about does Russell Wilson start the year for them? And Russell Wilson did not look good last year. And how long does he hold that job? Out of those 2 quarterbacks, I would much rather Justin Fields throwing the ball to my wide receivers over Russell Wilson. But veteran savvy, can he manage the games and get wins? And doesn't matter. Mike Tomlin doesn't care if the score is 14-10. A win's a win. And so I don't know if we see Fields at all this year. And with Pickens, I just dropped into wide receiver 33. Right now, I'm below consensus on him. I already was below consensus, not by a long stretch, but considering right now in ECR, he is the 58th overall player. Right now in my ranks, I dropped George Pickens to 71st. So I'm going to be a little bit lower on him because it's multiple parts or pieces. It's not only do you look at the quarterback play, not only do you look at the passing volume, but like Fitz kind of talked about, what the heck do they do in the red zone? Are they going to use the QB runs? They're going to use the running backs a lot in the red zone. Atlanta was not a team that passed in the red zone last year. I don't think that they're going to do that this year with Pittsburgh. So Arthur Smith effect, it really kiboshes Pickens on multiple levels. It's like, okay, volume, touchdowns. What's our out here? What's our out for Pickens? Oh, he's just good enough and talented to overcome that. Okay, hey George Pickens, call up Drake London. Let's talk about that. You want to talk to him about how that happened? Call up Kyle Pitts. Oh, y'all just get on a group call, get on a group chat, and discuss how bad that was. The talent couldn't rise above Arthur Smith, and that can definitively happen again this year, unfortunately.
By the way, I wasn't going to bring this up earlier during the Derrick Henry conversation because we talked before the show about how we don't really care so much about the schedule. But since Fitz brought it up, and just because I want to make another point in Henry's favor, the Ravens play the Texans in Week 17. So you get Derrick Henry against the Texans in the fantasy championship game.
Glorious.
Just pointing that out there. It'll be quite a Christmas day. I think, for Henry managers.
Okay.
I think that's a good case, that you're making there kind of against him, Debro. I want to go to your player, Debro, because I know this is somebody you are much, much higher than consensus on.
Dude, I don't understand what in the ever-loving hell we're doing about Trey McBride. Like, why is he in the 50s? I stare at him when I'm on Underdog and I'm selecting him in the 40s and I'm like, pick. I just keep drafting him. Like, I really don't get what the heck we're doing with him. We have gone sideways with elite tight end in early rankings and ECR and just drafts in general. People are like, oh, Travis Kelce, he was a good pick. Difference maker pick over the last few years. Mark Andrews, we were selected him in the second round. This year, everybody's like, no, we hate all things tight end. And it's trickle-down effect, man. It's starting at the very top. But Trey McBride, he's ranked as the tight end 3, the tight end 5 in some rankings. I just don't know what else Trey McBride has to show people. Last year, weeks 8 through 18, he was first, or at least top 5 in everything. First in weighted opportunity, first in target share, 5th in receiving grade, 4th in yards per route run. He was 4th in red zone targets amongst all tight ends, and he only spiked 3 touchdowns in that spot. So you can even talk about even the volume he was getting. There's regression to be had. So Trey McBride, why do we not love this man and put him up inside of the top? Like right now in my rankings, and people could say I'm insane for it, wouldn't be the first time people have said this, I have him as a top 20 player. I look at him as a difference maker. Like, I just don't understand. What's the case against him? Oh, Marvin Harrison Jr.? Okay, Arizona throws the ball 550 times this year. He's still going to get plenty of volume. He's still going to be top 3 amongst tight ends and targets. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr. is not getting 400 freaking targets. Like, come on.
You, Debro, are not the only person in our expert consensus rankings to have him as highly ranked at the position, but you are the highest ranker in the industry overall in terms of where you are putting him. And you know it. I mean, you admit it. You know it's like aggressive.
I know it, but I'm planting a flag here. It's like if we get yesteryear type of Travis Kelce production, which is basically what the frick we got out of him down the last part of last season. If that happens through the entirety of this season with a fully healthy Kyler Murray in the second year of Arizona's offensive system, why would we not want that type of player that can be a difference maker for your squad on a weekly basis in your lineups? And why is that not worth going in the second round of drafts? Hell, I'll even water this down a little bit. Why is that not worth going in the third round of drafts? Why is he in the 50s?
Can I answer that question?
Please do, Fitz.
Okay,
please.
so and this is only meant as gentle pushback, D-Bro, because I really
push back hard. I want you to try to push me over because I just feel like I'm on an island here, man.
I like Trey McBride too, although he was the primary #1 pass catcher for the Cardinals last year, and he's certainly not going to be that this year with Marvin Harrison Jr. aboard. But the thing is, I think it's more about the texture of the overall tight end market, D-Bro. It's deep, and it used to be that Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews were the only 2 things you could really latch onto at tight end. And you would pay through the nose to get that. People used to draft Travis Kelce in the first round. Mark Andrews, no later than the 2-3 turn. Now you've got a lot of good young tight ends. You've got McBride. You've got Dalton Kincaid, who suddenly is, going to play this enhanced role in the Bills' passing game, presumably with what they've lost at wide receiver. You've got guys if you wait on tight end, I think Jake Ferguson, and I'm not trying to be a Wisconsin homer here, but the Cowboys haven't really added anything at wide receiver. Their defense maybe has gotten a little bit worse. You can make the case that he's a really good value. There's just more depth. You can see optimism for Kyle Pitts now. There are 10 or 11 good options at tight end all of a sudden, and we didn't used to have that. So that's the reason I don't necessarily want to get one of these guys in the first 3 rounds.
The only mild pushback against that, Fitzy, that I'll say here is that we play this game every year with the tight end depth, and I don't think it necessarily is as deep as everybody thinks it is. George Kittle is a year older. Kyle Pitts, you could play the Kirk Cousins, you could play this entire thing, like you could play the entire offensive situation. Mark Andrews, yes, but then we got to go down the health rabbit hole with him. Touchdowns with Derrick Henry, Travis Kelce's another year older. I think like looking at those top tight end guys, I feel like the players that can give us a true tight end 1 overall upside or top 3 at the position, I feel like the market's just as thin as it always has been. I don't disagree that like maybe we have a little bit more optimism about the tight ends, but I also feel like there's guys that you can poke holes in them. I mean, all the way down the board after like McBride, Laporta, and really just after those 2 guys, because you could even poke holes in Kincaid and say, you know, what happens with the targets, Knox, all that kind of stuff, and Buffalo Bills offense just in general.
I get it. And we have fooled ourselves for certain. Like, I mean, I used to fool myself every year into thinking tight end was deeper than it actually was. But I do feel like
I've done it.
I do feel like this time it's not a mirage, that the position really has turned a corner and that there's unprecedented depth.
We got to move on to the next round here. At 61, Joe Burrow, then Dak Prescott, Terry McLaurin, Ramondre Stevenson, Kyler Murray, Zamir White, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Calvin Ridley, Najee Harris, Rashee Rice, Dalton Kincaid, Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, and Tony Pollard. So, guys, we'll go quickly here as we get to the end of the show. But, Fitz, who are you highlighting?
Terry McLaurin, who has banked 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and the quarterbacks he has played more than one game with over that stretch are Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, late career Alex Smith, Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Sam Howell, and Jacoby Brissett. And now McLaurin gets to play with Jaden Daniels, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, the number 2 pick in the draft, the guy who averaged 317 passing yards and 3.3 touchdowns a game for an SEC team last year. Plus, the Commanders don't have a great running game. They're probably going to be pretty pass heavy, and they don't have a very good defense, so they might be thrust into a lot of shootout game scripts. McLaurin obviously passes the eye test. He's really good. He's shown us that. His ADP should not be outside the top 30 at wide receiver.
D-Bro, obviously you're very high on Jaden Daniels, so are you expecting big things from McLaurin too?
Yes, sir. I very much am, because that's another reason why I'm high on Ben Sinnott and I'm high on Luke McCaffrey, because Jahan Dotson's not a high-end target earner. I think that, you know, we could see him not even starting at maybe the back half of the season. But looking at Terry McLaurin, I just think he's going to eat. And I think, like, you know, all this yesteryear Allen Robinson kind of like memes and stuff, Terry McLaurin's just that guy. Like, it's the DJ Moore of last year. It's like, hey, got him good quarterback play. Watch him cook.
Who do you got in this section, D-Bro?
Why do we still hate Zamir White? That needs to get brought up here. Why is that a thing? Like, he's going to get all the volume he can handle. And the Raiders upgraded this offensive line in the offseason with their moves in the draft. They've added multiple players from free agency, and the totality of all of those moves, I think we should be saying as a collective, however that all shifts out, the Raiders offensive line will play better this season. And Zamir White, who's taking touches away from him? Alexander Mattison? We played that game before. He couldn't even hold the job in Minnesota last year. So no, I'm not worried about that. Amir Abdullah? No. Dylan Lobby? He's probably not even playing passing downs over Amir Abdullah. Like, Zamir White, weeks 15 through 18 last year, was averaging 23.3 touches. He was the RB12 in fantasy points per game. He was on pace to have over 300, and I get it was a 4-game sample, but over 350 freaking carries in a season. And I don't think he keeps up that type of volume, but still, as a player, the low ball probably for him right now, if he stays healthy, is he's going to get 300 touches this year. And so why? Why is he going as late as he is? I understand some people will say, okay, but he's just a classic dead zone back. Like, oh, well, we're not that enamored to draft him. He's just this year's Alexander Mattison. And I'm like, that's quite harsh, considering when he was the starter over all of the stuff that I already mentioned. Amongst 41 qualifying running backs, he was also 13th in explosive run rate, 17th in rushing success rate. So this is not me just clinging to the volume, but you can make the volume case quite easily, and the other deeper numbers also support that he was quietly really stinking good when he was running the ball last year. So Zamir White, stop disrespecting him, people.
Fitz, you are the low man on Zamir White. Do you feel like you're disrespecting him?
Love you, Fitzy. I'm sorry.
I mean, I like him. I don't see much pass catching upside. That's my one issue with him.
D-Bro, give me one guy who might rise into the top 75 here as we wrap up.
Kyle Pitts, man. Talked about him earlier in this show. I think he rises in the top 75. And for all the parts or pieces we talked about the Arthur Smiths, the talent is still there for Kyle Pitts. And I'm just going to pull up the one metric that I always go to for tight ends. Yards per route run against man coverage. All of the top guys perform extremely well. This is where you're talking about just looking into the microcosm of elite ceiling. The guys that led in this metric last year amongst all tight ends with 50 or more routes versus man coverage, George Kittle, Sam Laporta, TJ Hawkinson, Isaiah Likely, Evan Ingram, Travis Kelce, and oh, there we go. Kyle Pitts was number 7. So I'm still investing in the upside of Kyle Pitts. I think we finally see the breakout season and he's going to crush. Yeah, I've already got him ranked as a top 75 player, but others don't. As far as our ECR, he's going to get there. So people need to get on the train.
Fitz, give me a player for you, too, that you think is going to get into the top 75.
Deontay Johnson. And last year, 11 weeks into the season, all the way up to Thanksgiving, Adam Thielen was wide receiver 10 in PPR scoring. And Thielen was averaging 9.7 targets a game and 7.6 catches a game. Now that sort of target and catch upside is what Deontay Johnson has for the Carolina Panthers, except that Deontay Johnson is not going to average under 10 yards per catch like Adam Thielen did last year. Like, Deontay Johnson is younger and better than Adam Thielen. And oh, by the way, it's possible we get a year 2 improvement from Panthers quarterback Bryce Young, who now gets to work with noted quarterback whisperer Dave Canales.
All right, we will get out of there on that. We got through the entire top 75, plus a couple extra names there for you. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around for the episode. For D-Bro and Fitz, I'm Ryan Warman, and we'll see you again next time.